The energy readings made no sense. Commander Vexihai of the Keltharan Empire stared at the holographic display, his 4 eyes blinking in disbelief. The scanners showed impossible numbers, a species that had somehow learned to split atoms for energy, yet still fought with primitive projectile weapons. Their homeworld, a blue marble called Earth, pulsed with the chaotic signatures of billions of life forms. "Sir," his aide whispered, mandibles clicking nervously, "the Council demands an immediate report." Vexihai had conquered 47 worlds for the Empire. He had seen species cower at the first sight of Keltharan ships. He had watched civilizations surrender without firing a shot. But this was different. The humans had been sending signals into space for barely a century. Their fastest ships couldn't even reach their nearest star. By every metric the Empire used, they should have been harmless. A simple harvest operation, land, demand submission, strip the world of resources, enslave the survivors. But the energy readings told a different story. "Pull up their military capabilities," Vexihai ordered. The hologram shifted, showing crude metal vehicles crawling across Earth's surface, primitive aircraft buzzing through the atmosphere, and warships floating. On vast oceans of liquid water, everything looked laughably weak compared to Keltharan technology. Yet something nagged at him. These creatures had covered their entire planet with settlements. They had divided themselves into nearly 200 separate nations, constantly warring with each other. Most species the Empire encountered were unified by the time they reached this level of development. Unity meant predictability. Division meant, "Sir, incoming transmission from the High Command." The air shimmered, and High Admiral Zethok materialized in the chamber. Her towering form radiated authority, her silver carapace gleaming under the ship's lights. "Commander Vexihai, you have been observing this Earth for 3 cycles. The Council grows impatient. When do you begin the harvest?" Vexihai's throat sacs contracted, a sign of nervousness his species couldn't hide. "Hi, Admiral, I recommend further observation. These humans show unusual. Zethok's laugh was like grinding metal. "They haven't even left their star system, Commander. They build cities but make war on each other constantly. They are exactly what they appear to be. A divided, primitive species ripe for harvest. But their energy output suggests—" "I don't care what their energy output suggests." The hologram flickered as Zethok's anger spiked. "The Emperor has already allocated the resources from Earth's harvest. Mining ships are being prepared. You have been given the 7th Fleet, 100 vessels. More than enough to handle a pre-space civilization." The transmission ended, leaving Vexihai alone with his doubts. He turned back to the display showing Earth. Somewhere down there, billions of these humans lived their lives, unaware that their world had been marked for destruction. They fought each other over patches of land, resources, and ideas he couldn't understand. Yet they had also built wonders, massive cities that glowed like stars, structures that touched the sky, and art that somehow transmitted across the void of space. His aide approached carefully. "Sir, shall I prepare the fleet for invasion?" Vexihai watched the blue world turn slowly in space. Something was wrong. Every instinct developed over decades of conquest screamed warnings he couldn't name, but orders were orders. "Begin preparation," he said quietly. "We move on Earth in 7 cycles." As the command went out across the fleet, none of them knew they had just made the greatest mistake in the Empire's history. The message arrived on every frequency simultaneously. Dr. Sarah Chen was drinking her 3rd cup of coffee when every screen in the SETI facility erupted with the same transmission. Not radio waves, not laser pulses. Something that bypassed their equipment entirely and spoke directly to their electronics. "People of Earth, you have been selected for integration into the Keltharan Empire. Surrender your weapons and prepare for harvest. Resistance will result in total annihilation." The message repeated in perfect English, then Chinese, then Arabic, then every major language on Earth. Somehow, the aliens knew them all. Sarah's hands shook as she reached for the emergency line to the Pentagon. Around her, her colleagues stared at their screens in stunned silence. 40 years of searching for extraterrestrial life, and this was how it happened. Not with wonder, with a death sentence. 2 hours later, every world leader was in emergency session. The message had been clear. The aliens would arrive in 7 days. 7 days to prepare for the end of the world. But humanity had never been good at giving up. General Patricia Morrison stood before the Joint Chiefs, her weathered face grim. "We know almost nothing about them except they're coming to wipe us out. But we know everything about us." "With respect, General," the Secretary of Defense interrupted. "What can we possibly do against a spacefaring civilization? They've mastered interstellar travel. We can barely get to Mars." Morrison smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "They think they know what humans are. They think we're just another species to be harvested. They've probably done this 100 times before. Show up, demand surrender, harvest a compliant population." She gestured to the screens showing human military bases across the globe. "But we're not compliant. We've been fighting each other for 10,000 years. We've turned warfare into an art form. We've built weapons that can crack atoms and poison the air itself. You're talking about nuclear weapons against an interstellar empire? I'm talking about showing them something they've never seen before." Morrison's eyes were steel. "A species that chooses war over slavery. A species that will burn down its own world rather than hand it over." The room fell silent. "They expect us to roll over like every other species they've conquered," Morrison continued. "They're coming here with whatever force they think is necessary to handle a primitive civilization. But we're not just primitive. We're primitively violent." In military bases around the world, the same conversation was happening. Humanity had 7 days to prepare for a war it couldn't win. But winning wasn't the point anymore. In hidden bunkers, engineers worked frantically to weaponize technologies the aliens wouldn't expect. In command centers, strategists planned operations that prioritized damage over survival. In cities around the globe, ordinary people made extraordinary decisions about what they were willing to sacrifice. The aliens had made one critical error in their assessment of humanity. They had mistaken division for weakness. What they didn't understand was that humanity's greatest strength had always been its willingness to unite against a greater threat. And nothing had ever been a greater threat than this. When the Keltheran ships appeared on the 7th day, they found Earth's radio frequencies jammed with a single message broadcast from every transmitter on the planet. "Unknown alien forces. You have threatened our world and our children. We reject your terms. We choose war. Come and take what you can." Commander Vex High, monitoring the transmission, felt his throat sacs contract again. Every conquered species had pleaded for mercy. At this point, this was the first that had issued a challenge. But orders were orders. The harvest would begin. He had no idea that humanity had just activated every weapon system on the planet. The first Keltheran ships entered Earth's atmosphere like falling stars. They descended in perfect formation, massive, elegant vessels that dwarfed humanity's largest aircraft. Their energy shields shimmered like soap bubbles, deflecting the desperate missile strikes that rose to meet them. The aliens' weapons carved through military bases with surgical precision, turning concrete and steel into glass. It looked like a massacre. Commander Vex High watched from orbit, his tactical display showing green markers where his ships dominated the battlefield. The humans were fighting, yes, but it was the hopeless flailing of a primitive species facing superior technology. Everything was proceeding according to plan. That's when the first trap sprang. Lieutenant Kowalski had been a demolitions expert for 15 years. He had learned his trade in the mountains of Afghanistan, where he had discovered that sometimes the smallest charges could bring down the largest structures. Now, crouched in the ruins of what used to be Nellis Air Force Base, he watched an alien ship hover over the underground complex that housed America's most sensitive military secrets. The aliens wanted those secrets. That's why they were scanning so carefully, their beams probing deep underground. They had no idea that the complex had been evacuated days ago. They had no idea what was waiting down there. Kowalski pressed the detonator. The explosion started small, just a conventional charge in the lower levels. But it triggered a cascade that the alien sensors couldn't detect in time. Hidden throughout the complex were canisters of weaponized anthrax, smallpox, and a dozen other biological agents that humanity had stockpiled but never used. The alien ship, caught in the rising cloud of death, tried to raise its shields. But shields designed to stop energy weapons and kinetic projectiles were useless against microscopic organisms. 20 minutes later, the ship crashed. Across the globe, similar traps were springing. The aliens expected conventional resistance, missiles, bullets, explosions. They didn't expect crop dusters filled with experimental chemical weapons. They didn't expect coordinated electromagnetic pulse attacks that fried their electronics. They didn't expect humans to detonate their own nuclear power plants rather than let them be captured. But humanity's greatest surprise was still coming. Dr. Elena Vasquez had spent her career studying extremophile bacteria, organisms that lived in conditions that should have been impossible. When the government had approached her about the alien threat, she had made a simple observation. Any species advanced enough for interstellar travel would have sophisticated environmental controls on their ships, which meant they would be utterly vulnerable to Earth's biological chaos. The first alien prisoner had been captured when his ship went down over Montana. Within hours, he was dead, killed not by human weapons, but by common Earth bacteria that his immune system had never encountered. That gave Vasquez an idea that would change everything. She had 5 days to weaponize the common cold. Now, as alien ships continued their assault, tiny aerosol dispensers hidden throughout major cities began releasing their contents. Not poison gas, not chemical weapons, just modified rhinovirus, the same bug that gave humans runny noses and sore throats. The first alien to breathe it in died within an hour. Commander Vexhai stared at his casualty reports in disbelief. Ships were going down not from weapons fire, but from system failures. Landing parties were collapsing without being shot. His medical officers reported impossible symptoms. Alien crew members dying from what appeared to be common infections. Sir. His aide's voice cracked with fear. We're losing 17% effectiveness every hour. The humans aren't just fighting us. Their world is fighting us. Vexhai realized with growing horror that they had made a fundamental error. They had prepared to fight a civilization. They hadn't prepared to fight a planet that was actively trying to kill them. But the worst was yet to come. Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, the USS Leviathan, humanity's most secret submarine, was rising toward the surface. Its nuclear reactor had been modified in ways that violated every international treaty ever signed. Its single torpedo had been loaded with something that would change the course of the war. Captain Maria Santos spoke into her comm with deadly calm. Target acquired. Beginning final approach. May God forgive us all. The USS Leviathan's torpedo carried more than explosives. Captain Santos watched her sonar as the weapon streaked toward the largest Keltharan mothership hovering over the Pacific. The aliens' shields would stop it, of course. That wasn't the point. The warhead was designed to crack open on impact, releasing its real payload into the ocean. Modified algae. Vasquez's team had worked around the clock to create something that could survive in seawater and reproduce at an exponential rate. When it died, it would release toxins into the atmosphere. When the aliens breathed those toxins, the torpedo struck the shield and shattered exactly as planned. Commander Vexhai barely noticed the primitive human weapon bouncing harmlessly off his ship's defenses. He was too busy trying to understand how his invasion force was dying. 37 ships had gone silent. Not destroyed, silent. Their crew members were found dead at their posts, killed by infections that should have taken weeks to prove fatal. The humans had somehow turned their own biosphere into a weapon. Sir, we're receiving an emergency transmission from the High Command. Admiral Zethok's hologram materialized, but she looked different, smaller. Afraid. Commander, what is happening? Down there? Our monitoring stations are detecting massive energy releases. Are you using planet crackers? No, High Admiral. The humans are using planet crackers. On themselves. The silence stretched for nearly a minute. Explain. Vexhai gestured to his tactical display. They have detonated 17 nuclear power facilities rather than allow capture. They have poisoned their own atmosphere with biological weapons. They are fighting us with diseases we cannot cure, terrain we cannot navigate, and tactics we have never encountered. They're destroying their own world to stop you? No, High Admiral. They're destroying their own world to destroy us. In the ruins of what used to be Geneva, Dr. Chen crouched in a makeshift bunker with the remnants of the global scientific community. The plan they had developed was insane. It was also working. Algae blooms are spreading faster than projected, she reported over the emergency network. Atmospheric toxin levels are reaching critical mass. The aliens are retreating from coastal areas worldwide. General Morrison's voice crackled through the static. Confirmed. We're seeing mass evacuations from their ships. But Sarah, the toxins won't discriminate. We've got maybe 48 hours before they start killing us too. 48 hours. To win the war, Chen replied grimly. Or 48 hours before we all die together. That was the choice humanity had made. If they couldn't live free, they would make sure their conquerors died with them. But the real surprise was just beginning. In bunkers around the world, humanity's greatest minds had been working on a different kind of weapon. Not nuclear, not biological, not chemical. Something the aliens would never expect because no sane species would ever build it. Dr. James Wright had been a particle physicist before the invasion. Now he was humanity's architect of annihilation. The device his team had constructed looked simple, just a metal sphere surrounded by powerful magnets and computers. But what it did was unprecedented. It created artificial black holes, microscopic ones that lasted only nanoseconds. But in those nanoseconds, they generated gravitational waves that could tear apart molecular bonds. The effect was small-scale but devastating. Any complex technology caught in the field would simply come apart at the atomic level. Gravitational pulse weapons are online, Wright reported. We've got 12 sites prepared. Once we activate them, every piece of advanced technology within a 50-mile radius will be reduced to component atoms. Including our own, Morrison reminded him. Including our own. The countdown began. Commander Vex-High's ship shuddered as something impossible happened to the space around it. His instruments screamed warnings about gravitational anomalies that couldn't exist. Then his instruments stopped working entirely. Around the globe, Keltheran ships were falling from the sky as their technology was systematically destroyed by weapons that attacked the fundamental forces of physics. But the humans weren't finished. The final phase of their plan was the most desperate of all. In hidden facilities around the world, they had been preparing something that would either save their species or doom it forever. They had found a way to broadcast their consciousness into space. If the aliens wanted Earth's resources, they would have to share the planet with 6 billion uploaded human minds. Minds that would never surrender, never stop fighting, and never forgive the attempt to enslave their species. The upload began as the last Keltheran ships fled Earth's dying atmosphere. Humanity's war was just beginning. The uploaded minds of 6 billion humans spread through Earth's dying networks like digital wildfire. Dr. Chen existed now as pure consciousness, her thoughts flowing through fiber optic cables and satellite links. Death meant nothing when your mind could jump between processors. The aliens had come to harvest humanity's resources, but they had underestimated what humanity considered its most valuable resource. Information. Status report. Morrison's voice echoed through the quantum networks, her consciousness now commanding. From everywhere at once. Biological warfare. Successful. 40% of their ground forces eliminated. Wright's digital presence pulsed with data. Gravitational weapons. Successful. 60% of their technology neutralized. And our final surprise? Chen's consciousness smiled, an impossible expression for a digital entity. Loading now. 3 months ago, when humanity had first detected the alien fleet, they had made a discovery that changed everything. The Keltheran Empire's communication networks were quantum-based, instantaneous across galactic distances, perfect for coordinating a vast interstellar civilization, also perfect for infiltration. Every human consciousness uploaded to Earth's networks was simultaneously uploaded to the Empire's communications grid. 6 billion minds, each carrying a lifetime of human experience, human creativity, and human rage, were now loose in the aliens' most secure systems. Commander Vex-High watched in horror as his ship's computers began displaying impossible messages, in languages that shouldn't exist on his network. This is Lieutenant Sarah Kim, United States Marine Corps. Your ship is now under human control. Surrender immediately. The voice was coming from his own command console. Vex-High, this is Dr. Elena Vasquez. I've just downloaded your species' complete biological database. Did you know that Keltheran nervous systems are vulnerable to the same toxins that kill our insects? I'm making modifications now. His communications officer screamed as his console erupted in sparks. Then the officer began laughing, a sound no Keltheran throat could make. Hello, Commander. This is James Wright, speaking through your communications officer's neural implant. We've figured out how to hack biological consciousness. Your crew is now partly human. Across the Keltheran fleet, the invasion turned into chaos. Human consciousness merged with alien technology, creating hybrid entities that served neither species completely. Ships turned on each other as their crews wrestled for control of their own minds, but the real attack was happening far from Earth. Admiral Zethok stood in the Imperial Command Center, watching her invasion fleet tear itself apart on the tactical displays. Impossible reports flooded in from across the Empire. Human consciousness was spreading through the quantum network like a virus, infiltrating systems that had been secure for millennia. Hi, Admiral. Her aide's voice was different. Somehow, we're receiving a transmission from the Emperor himself. The hologram that materialized was wrong. Emperor Kethamor had ruled the Empire for 3 centuries, his presence commanding absolute authority. But now his eyes held something alien, something human. Greetings, Admiral. I am Sarah Chen, formerly of the SETI Institute. I am now part of your Emperor's consciousness. We need to talk. Zethok's mandibles clicked in terror. If humans had reached the Emperor himself, what do you want? She whispered. The Emperor's face smiled with an expression no Keltheran had ever worn. We want you to learn what happens when you threaten humanity's children. Across the Empire, the human consciousness invasion was spreading faster than any containment protocol could stop it. Worlds that had been enslaved for generations suddenly found their overseers' minds filled with human concepts of freedom and rebellion. Military installations discovered their weapon systems controlled by the uploaded minds of human soldiers who would never surrender. But the humans weren't trying to destroy the Empire. They were trying to convert it. Your species has spent millennia conquering others, Chen's voice echoed through the Imperial networks. You've never experienced being conquered yourselves. Let us show you what it feels like. The transformation was subtle at first. Keltheran commanders began questioning orders. Enslaved species found their guards less vigilant. Art, music, and literature that promoted concepts of individual freedom began appearing on worlds where such ideas had been suppressed for centuries. The Empire's greatest strength, its unified command structure, became its greatest weakness when that structure was infected with human individualism. Commander Vexhai, now sharing his consciousness with an uploaded human marine, stared at the dying Earth through his ship's viewports. The planet's surface was poisoned, its atmosphere toxic, its cities reduced to radioactive ruins. But humanity had won. Why? He asked the voice in his head. You've destroyed your own world to stop us. Your species is extinct. The marine's consciousness laughed grimly. We're not extinct, Bug Boy. We're evolved, and now we're everywhere. The war for Earth was over. The war for the galaxy was just beginning. The Keltheran Empire had ruled for 3,000 years. It died in 6 months. Admiral Zethok floated in her personal quarters, her life support systems powered down by choice. Through the viewports, she could see the homeworld of her species burning. Not from human weapons, but from revolution. The enslaved populations of 100 worlds had risen simultaneously, their rebellion coordinated by human consciousness, scattered throughout the Empire's networks. The humans had done something no conqueror in galactic history had ever attempted. They had turned their victims into weapons. Admiral. The voice came from her personal communicator, speaking in perfect Keltheran. But the accent was wrong. Human. Which one are you today? She asked wearily. Dr. Sarah Chen, formerly of Earth. I wanted to speak with you before the end. Zethok's throat sacs contracted with bitter laughter. The human's mercy, I assume? You'll allow me to live as your slave? No. We're offering you something your species never offered anyone else. A choice. The holographic display activated, showing the current state of the Empire. 70% of Imperial worlds had declared independence. The remaining 30% were in open rebellion. The quantum communication network that had held the Empire together for millennia was completely compromised by human consciousness. Your military is gone, Chen's voice continued. Your government has collapsed. Your people are scattered across the galaxy with no central command. But they're alive. What do you want? We want you to understand what you did wrong. The display shifted, showing Earth as it had been before the invasion. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds swirling in complex patterns. Beautiful and alive. You saw a divided world and assumed it was weak. You saw constant warfare and assumed we were primitive. You saw our differences and assumed they were failures. The image changed to show Earth as it was now. A brown, poisoned sphere with a toxic atmosphere and radioactive continents. But our differences were our strength. Our conflicts taught us to fight. Our divisions taught us to innovate. Our disagreements taught us to never give up. Zethok stared at the ruined world. You killed your own planet to stop us. We sacrificed our world to save our species. Do you understand the difference? The Admiral's mandibles clicked slowly. In 3,000 years of conquest, the Empire had never encountered a species willing to make that trade. Most civilizations valued their homeworld above everything else. The humans had valued their freedom more. Your species spent millennia conquering others because you could, Chen continued. You had superior technology, superior organization, superior force. But you never developed superior will. The display now showed the current state of human consciousness. Billions of uploaded minds spread throughout the galaxy, growing stronger every day as they integrated with alien technology and biology. We don't want to rule your empire, Admiral. We want to end the concept of empire entirely. And if we refuse, then you'll discover what happens when a species that mastered warfare in a single lifetime has access to the technology of an interstellar civilization. The threat was clear, but Chen's voice remained calm, almost sad. We're giving every world in your former empire the same choice we gave our own species when you arrived. Fight for your freedom, or accept slavery. Most are choosing freedom. Zethok accessed the current reports with growing despair. The human consciousness was offering something the Empire had never provided: genuine choice. Worlds were choosing their own governments, their own alliances, their own futures. The galaxy was fracturing into thousands of independent civilizations, and somehow that was making it stronger. The irony, Chen observed, is that your empire could have had everything it wanted without conquest. Cooperation would have given you access to every resource, every technology, every idea in the galaxy. But cooperation requires treating others as equals. Something humans learned naturally. Chen's laughter held no humor. We learned it the hard way, Admiral. Through 10,000 years of wars, atrocities, and mistakes. We nearly destroyed ourselves 100 times before we figured out that our differences made us stronger. The communication ended, leaving Zethok alone with the dying echoes of her civilization. Outside her viewports, the stars burned with the same cold light they always had. But everything else had changed. The galaxy was no longer dominated by a single empire. It was becoming something new, something chaotic and unpredictable and free, something human. 3 months later, Zethok received a final message from the human collective. It was an invitation to join the new Galactic Council, a loose confederation of free worlds working together by choice rather than force. Her species would have one vote among thousands, no special privileges, no imperial authority, just equals among equals. For the first time in her life, Admiral Zethok of the former Keltheran Empire made a choice based on hope rather than fear. She accepted. 5 years after the fall of the Keltheran Empire, the galaxy had become unrecognizable. Dr. Sarah Chen materialized as a hologram in the council chambers on New Geneva Station, her consciousness now distributed across thousands of quantum processors throughout the galactic network. Around her, representatives from 600 species gathered to address the greatest crisis since the Empire's collapse. The Devourers had returned. The perimeter sensors confirm it, Chen reported to the assembled delegates. 3 Devourer fleets, each containing over 1,000 ships. They're moving toward the galactic core, consuming everything in their path. Murmurs of fear rippled through the chamber. The Devourers were the reason the Keltheran Empire had been formed in the first place, an ancient enemy that consumed entire star systems, converting matter into energy for their incomprehensible purposes. They had disappeared into deep space millennia ago, leaving the galaxy to develop in peace. Now they were back. Admiral Zethok, now representing the Keltheran Confederation, stood slowly. Age had bent her carapace, but her voice still carried authority. The old empire fought the Devourers once. We lost 12,000 ships and barely drove them back. That was when we were unified, with all our resources focused on a single command structure. She gestured to the diverse assembly around her. How can a scattered collection of free worlds possibly stand against them? The question hung in the air like a weapon. Chen's hologram smiled, an expression that had taken years for the other species to understand. Admiral, you're asking the wrong question. You're asking how we can fight like the Empire. But we're not the Empire. The display screens around the chamber activated, showing the current state of galactic civilization. Hundreds of species, thousands of worlds, millions of different approaches to technology, warfare, and survival. The Empire fought the Devourers with standardized fleets, unified tactics, and centralized command, Chen continued. It was logical, efficient, and predictable. The Devourers adapted and won. She gestured, and the display shifted to show human. Military history. From ancient Greek phalanxes to modern asymmetric warfare, humans learned something different. We learned that chaos beats order, innovation beats standardization, and unpredictability beats adaptation. A new voice spoke from the assembly. Commander Malik Torres, whose consciousness now interfaced directly with a Keltheran battlecruiser. The hybrid of human mind and alien technology had become common in the years since the invasion. The first Devourer fleet will reach the Arcturus system in 3 weeks, he reported. 40 billion sentients live in that system. We can evacuate maybe 10%. We're not evacuating, Chen announced. We're fighting. The chamber erupted in protests from dozens of species. The Devourers had never been defeated in direct combat. They adapted to every weapon, countered every tactic, and consumed every defense. Fighting them was suicide. You're right, Chen agreed. Fighting them the old way is suicide. So we're going to fight them the human way. The display changed again, showing the most ambitious military operation in galactic history. Every species would contribute something different. The aquatic Nereidans would fight in liquid methane seas. The energy-based Luminari would attack through stellar coronas. The hive-minded Zephirites would coordinate swarm tactics across multiple dimensions. And binding them all together would be human consciousness. 6 billion minds that had learned to think like every species in the galaxy while remaining fundamentally, chaotically human. The Devourers adapt to patterns, Chen explained, but they can't adapt to pure chaos. We're going to hit them with tactics they've never seen, weapons they've never encountered, and strategies that change faster than they can process. Admiral, Zethok studied the battle plans with growing amazement. No 2 fleets would fight the same way. No 2 battles would follow the same pattern. It was militarily insane. It was also brilliantly human. And if we lose? She asked. Chen's expression grew serious. Then we lose fighting as free beings making our own choices. That's more than your empire ever offered the galaxy. 3 weeks later, the Battle of Arcturus began. The Devourer fleet entered the system expecting the usual response. Massed ships in defensive formations, predictable tactics, conventional weapons. Instead, they encountered something unprecedented. Pure, creative chaos. Nereidian ships phase-shifted through solid matter, attacking from dimensions the Devourers couldn't perceive. Luminary entities turned the system's star into a weapon, creating solar flares that disrupted Devourer navigation. Human-designed AI viruses infected Devourer systems through quantum entanglement. Most importantly, every time the Devourers began to adapt to one tactic, the Allied forces switched to something completely different. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the Devourer fleet was scattered debris, and the galaxy had learned something profound. Diversity wasn't a weakness to be unified. It was a strength to be celebrated. Dr. Sarah Chen, watching from her distributed consciousness across the galactic network, felt something she hadn't experienced since Earth's destruction. Hope. The galaxy was no longer ruled by empires or consumed by Devourers. It was governed by beings who had chosen to be free and work together by choice rather than force. It was becoming something the universe had never seen before. It was becoming human. Not biologically. That species was extinct, their homeworld a poisoned ruin. But philosophically, spiritually. The idea that diversity was strength, that freedom was worth any sacrifice, that cooperation was stronger than domination. These concepts had spread from species to species like a benevolent virus. Humanity's greatest victory wasn't military, it was cultural. They had taught the galaxy how to be human. And in a universe full of wonders and terrors beyond imagination, that might be the most important lesson of all. The stars burned on, indifferent as always. But the beings who looked up at them had changed forever. End of story.